Greetings, 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 beautiful souls. Greetings, beautiful souls. And I give gratitude that you came. Like my sage. There we go. We're gonna ring the bell. Okay, ring the bell to clear the energy, right? We're gonna light our sage, our yerba santa, cleanse the energy, right? Okay, so we gonna do our healing. Okay, we gonna have a conversation. So this will be the first healing from the 80s class. Okay, so every Tuesday at 8 p.m. we will be doing this. Okay, so okay, gratitude, gratitude. So let's get started with healing from the 80s. Okay, so okay. So the first thing I want to start off is saying that in the Bible, it talk about in the book of Genesis, the book of Genesis, it talks about in Egypt. Okay, the very first word in the book of Genesis is in. The very last word in Egypt, very last word in the book of Genesis is Egypt. So in the book of Genesis, it is actually elaborating about in Egypt. Okay? So, in Egypt, and also when we decode it, it says Isis genetics, right? So, Isis is also an Egyptian deity. Okay? So, we're able to decode that the Bible is telling us about in Egypt, the creation, the origins, and where we come from in Egypt, right? Okay, so with that being said, we've been putting up the maps where we've been learning that Egypt is here in America. And we've been learning that Egypt is also what we call the Bible Belt. Okay, so these are the southern regions. And in this southern region, these people of the land own land where they can grow their own food, where they depended on the land in order to give them life, right? They depended on the land for agriculture. They depended on the land for their medicine. They depended on the land for their clothes. They depended on the land for their housing, their shelter. Um, so the reason I started out talking about in Egypt and the Bible is because the Bible is telling us about these ancient Egyptians, which is us, because we are the people of the land. And in Exodus, right after Genesis, it talks about the curse of these people. And the curse is a 400-year curse on these people because these people did not keep the law. These people did not have righteousness in their heart. These people failed. Okay? So it talks about fallen angels. It talks about people lying, stealing, killing, destroying, It talks about people doing all type of wicked stuff under the sun, right? So, with that being said, that 400-year curse that is that the Bible talk about with us decoding it, we found out because we found out that the Willie Lynch letter is 400 years old as well. Because in the Willie Lynch letter, it says that these people will be cursed, these people will be divided. It says that this implement was placed upon these people to control them for 400 years. Okay? So I'm aware that the Willie Lynch letter is 400 years. I'm aware that in the Bible it talks about the curse of Egypt that is 400 years. And also, um, it's something else that has a 400 years that I'm thinking about, but I can't think of it right now. But it's okay. Um, so with that curse that was placed upon us, it says that we will be bought and sold. It say we will be bond women, bond men. It said that um, we would um, destroy. Okay, so in the Willie Lynch letter, it say basically they programmed us to destroy one another, right? They programmed us to tear another down. They programmed us to not trust one another. They programmed us to um, only stick to a certain stereotype. Uh, the programming is very, very deep that they did. At least the programming that they let us know about. But the programming is very, very deep that they did upon us. So a part of their programming was um, a war. And with this war, because the war had started a long time ago, right? The war was going on in the Bible. And the war that was going on in the Bible was about the land. They was fighting over the land, right? And when they was fighting, so when they was fighting over the land, they okay, well, so when they was fighting over the land, you could go back to how this is how they was fighting over the land a long time ago, right? So that their fight still going on to this day, and it's about land at the end of the day. So that is where the whole rack epidemic come in at, because during, to my understanding, during the civil rights era, and the reason I brung up Egypt, the reason I brung up the Bible is because through the decoding that we've been doing in the studies that we've been doing, we've been finding out that Egypt is where, I mean, Georgia is where all this stuff was taking place at, right? And when I say Georgia, Georgia was consisted of the four states, which is Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, in Georgia, the state of Georgia. So this was the territory known as Georgia in the 1700s. And in the 1700s, when this territory was known as Georgia, um, our ancestors lived there. So that would be France, right? Okay, and so with our ancestors living in what was known as France, they were known as the Freemans. Okay, and So they were known as the Freemans, and when they were known as the Freemans, can y'all still hear me? Can y'all still hear me? Okay, y'all can still hear me. So they were known as the Freemans, right? So with them known as the Freemans, that's the Moor Empire, right? The Moroccan Empire. So they were known as the Freemans, the Moorish. Um, they had all these different surnames that meant that they were free. And this was this was in the set. This is when you had all these different wars going on, such as the French Revolution. The French Revolution then turned into what is known as the Indian Wars. The Indian Wars turned into what is known as World War One. World War I turned into World War Two, and then World War Two went into what is known as the Civil Rights era. So once the Civil Rights era hit, they hit us with the 80s. So when the 80s came, that's when they called that the war on drugs. So in the 80s, what ended up happening was, and I had to explain it like that because I wanted you to understand from a spiritual aspect what trickled down biblically, right? You know how they say, as above, so below. What trickled down, literally, into what we are dealing with today. And so when we went through the 80s, they end up breaking up the family, right? Which that's the Willie Lynch letter syndrome, right? So they end up breaking up the families. So we no longer have villages, we no longer have communities, we no longer have unity, we no longer have support. Um, if you do something successful in your family, the family automatically will envy you, be jealous of you, hate you, this toxicity, right? And a lot of us are experiencing that. Why? Because these are the side effects from the war on drugs. Seriously. Because of so many different events had happened that nobody had time to really heal. Nobody really had time to do um, damage assessment, right? So when the war happened, let's talk about the war in the 80s, okay? So in the 80s, this is when this drug, the rack, hit the streets. Um, this rack had such a strong impact on people's lives because okay, there was people going into foster care. So there were children literally torn away from their parents, children who lost their identity, who don't know who they are, who don't know who their family is, who don't know. Some they got a movie about it. What is it, Anton Fisher? The Anton Fisher movie. But they got people out here that really got stories like that, broken, messed up stories. Then you got the movie that was like Losing Isaiah. So you got people out here that have health problems because their parents used this drug while they were pregnant or got pregnant on this drug, you know, because this drug has such a real strong effect on people's psychology, on people's mental, on people's spirit. This soul actually broke a nation. You know what I'm saying? So, um, this drug, there was what is called mass incarceration. This also went on in the 80s and 90s. So this was a war that went on against the people as well. So you had the drugs that were tearing up homes, tearing up families. You had the drugs sending people to foster homes. You had children being removed out of the homes. You had children being born on these, right? Greetings. And so then you had, wait, let me, so then you had, okay. So then you had, what is it called? So then, so you had all these different situations going on in the 80s, right? So as a result of the drugs, the mass incarceration, you had a lot of alcoholism going on. Um, it was a lot of neglect going on. There was a lot of abandonment issues that were formed. Um, there is a lot of anger. A lot of people are angry right now because of that, right? Because a lot of people had to go live with people. A lot of people got pushed off on other people. A lot of people felt like they was burdens. A lot of people felt lost. A lot of people didn't even understand what happened. And you got to understand this was a war against drugs. That's what they called it, a war against drugs, but the war was the drugs. That was the war, because we went straight out of World War II and boom, you know what I'm saying? So, this became trauma. This became an epidemic. Um, and nobody really healed or talked about this. People just moved on and kept living life. So, what are some of the things that come from this crack epidemic that I feel like we need to heal? We definitely need to heal. So, some of those things are abandonment issues. So, what is abandonment issues? We got abandonment issues where you have some people who were abandoned by their mother. Some people was abandoned by their father. Some people was abandoned by mother and father. Some people were abandoned by older siblings. Some people were abandoned. Everybody got a different story to tell, right? So, abandonment issues, in order to heal yourself from abandonment issues, well, it's not about necessarily healing yourself, it's about starting your healing journey, okay, with abandonment issues, right? So, the first thing you want to do is look up what is abandonment issues. Don't assume you know what they are. Actually, look up what is abandonment issues because 9 times out of 10, if you suffer from abandonment issues, you are still letting those abandonment issues control your life today. So, what does that look like? I'm going to give you an example of when abandonment issues still have a stronghold on you today. And I'm speaking not from a professional's point of view, I'm speaking from somebody who has researched abandonment issues and who is on a healing process of healing from abandonment issues. So that's where I'm speaking from, okay? Um, Abandonment issues are where you expect people to be there. You expect people to show up. You expect when people tell you they gonna come, they don't come. When people tell you they gonna do something, they don't do it. Um, so these become broken dreams. These become broken promises. These become lies. Okay, so you become comfortable with this. because that's a part of your abandonment issues, right? So you are okay when people give you empty promises. That's okay because that's comfortable for you, right? Because that's abandonment issues, right? Okay. So when people feed you what you want to hear, they might not come through with it, but that's okay because that's comfortable for you because that's comfort zone for your abandonment issues. So these are the things that you got to get tired of. So you got to be tired of that person that don't show up for other people. You gotta be tired. You know that pain that you felt when that person didn't show up for you. You gotta transmute that energy. So now you gotta start being there for people. Now you gotta start keeping your word. Now it's gonna be a struggle. It's gonna be hard to do. Why? Because it's gonna take you out your comfort zone. But this is what I mean by we gotta start studying what abandonment issues are and how to heal ourselves from these abandonment issues so these abandonment issues won't control our life. So these abandonment issues will not control our life, right? Okay. So so with abandonment issues, it's way more to abandonment issues, but I just wanted to give you an example of how abandonment issues are showing up into our lives right now and how they came from our past and how this is a domino effect and it's nothing to take personal. It's nothing to be angry at anybody about because this been going on. It's a form of war, you know. It's been going on for a long time. So until we start learning about these patterns and learning about these generational curses and learning about what abandonment issue is and what it feels like and how we can start um, healing ourselves from abandoning other people and start holding people accountable when people say they gonna do something, remind them, be on them, mention it, say something, communicate, express ourselves. Hey, when you don't do that, that make me feel like this. Hey, when you don't do that, that makes me feel like that. Instead of bottling up those emotions and the way we used to do, right? Because that becomes a habit. That becomes a bad habit. Just dealing with people abandoning you and dealing with that abuse and dealing with that pain. And we become addicted to that pain, right? Okay, so those are the abandonment issues that we need to work on. So, neglect issues. Did you know that neglect issues was different from abandonment issues? Most people don't realize that. But neglect issues are different from abandonment issues. Now, neglect issues come from abandonment issues, but neglect issues um, are actual behavior. It's a behavior. So it's like it could be something that trigger you. Um, it could be a emotional trigger. It can be something that rubbed you the wrong way, right? Um, it could be something that reminds you of something, and you just don't have, you were neglected, right? You just, right? Because that's something on your end. You know what I'm saying? It's something that you need to work on, right? But a lot of us do that. It's like we avoid going to something because somebody gonna be there that we don't want to see, or we we'll avoid saying something. We'll avoid doing something. You know, all of this is forms of neglect issues. So the big thing is to question ourselves and get to the, because we learned yesterday that we have a shadow part of ourself, right? And with our shadow part of ourself, this is our subconscious, and this is where we had our suppressed emotions. This is where we, hide the things we don't want to deal with. This is where the things we don't want to say, or the things we don't want to think about, or the things we ain't ready to face. This stuff sits in our subconscious, and it start playing out in other ways. It start coming out in relationships. It start coming out in where we create in peace at. It start showing up in places that we didn't invite it to. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so this is why we got to learn about these neglect issues. Why? Because a lot of people suffered from neglect issues in the 80s. Okay? Um, I can't really talk about what happened in the 70s because I wasn't here. I can't really talk about what happened in the 60s because I wasn't here. But I tell you what, I'm talking about what went on in these 80s. And in these 80s, I'm telling you that a lot of people suffered from neglect issues, okay? There was a lot of parents that was in jail. There was a lot of parents on drugs. It was a lot of parents on alcohol. It was a lot of parents emotionally unavailable. It was a lot of parents spiritually unavailable. It was a lot of parents trapped into religion. They was trapped into the church. They was trapped into, a different way of thinking. You know, they was even trapped into um, traditions. Because I remember being a child and the way my parents raised me, the way I was raised. They was raised a certain way where a child should be seen and not heard. So you was not allowed to express yourself. Okay, you was not allowed to say, um, I don't like this, I don't like that. You was not allowed to have an opinion. And the problem with that, greetings. And the problem with that is that you wasn't allowed to express yourself, or you wasn't allowed to have an opinion, or you wasn't allowed to, you know, be yourself. You didn't know how to be yourself because you wasn't allowed to be yourself. Yourself was suppressed. So I mean, you were an adult that don't know what you like. Why? Because you wasn't allowed to experience what you like as a child. Why? Because in the 80s wasn't none of that. Not in the 80s. In the 80s there was a lot of responsibilities. There was a lot of um, I knew people. If you was the oldest child, you might have been running the household. And they say the psychology behind that is like this. When you at work all day and you leave your child in charge, when you come home, that child in the mind, that child is being responsible. That child is maturing. That child is pushed into a place, not they self. They pushed into a place where they have to take care of other people. They pushed into a place where they have to grow and become somebody else, right? Because it's not about them being themselves, right? So they have to grow and be somebody else, right? So when that goes on, hold on. So when that goes on, like, so when you get those type of issues like that, I'm just using the oldest child because when you the oldest child, 9 times out of 10, when you grow up, you don't know how to take care of yourself. And I mean that because you've been taking care of other people literally since you got here. You've been putting other people first. So you don't know how to put yourself first. So therefore, those are what we call neglect issues. Because you neglect yourself. You give yourself what's left. So that's the type of attitude and that's the type of energy that you have for yourself. That you get what's left. You deserve what's left. You deserve what's left if something's left. Like you don't deserve the best. You don't deserve the top. You don't deserve what you want because you didn't get that. You had to settle, right? That's neglect issues. So a lot of those things we gotta work on within our neglect issues. Even if, like, say you the youngest child, because it don't really matter. Well, it matter what placement you are because each placement come with its own issues, right? So let's say you the youngest child. So if you are the youngest child, you probably were treated differently from the other children. So that means the other children probably explained to you that you have a different mother than they had. Um, your parent might be more laid back with the youngest child than they are with the older children. Um, so with that being said, that becomes a neglect issue thing too. Because depending on how many children in the house, the mother can only show so much attention. So by the time when you the youngest child, that attention, you get what I'm saying. You don't get as much attention. So depending on what placement child you are, especially if we factoring in these drugs and these alcohols and we factoring in um, the trauma that went on in the 80s, right? But I do want you to know that that is very important with it affects your psychology. Like what type of child you was. Was you responsible for others? Um, were you allowed to express yourself? Um, were you allowed to be creative? Were you teased for being yourself? Were all of that matters. And you got to ask yourself those type of questions on your healing journey because those things right there are the things that be holding us back right now. You know what I'm saying? Because those things was what shaped who we are today. Um, so we went through the abandonment issues. We went through the neglect issues. We also went through, um, the essaying, and a lot of essaying took place in the 80s during the rap epidemic. Um, So these are unhealed traumas. Um, these are the energies that cause people to be what we call over sexual. These are the hypersexual energies. Um, these are growing up in families where everybody dressed, like everybody got tight little bitty stuff on, right? So let's say you're a child and you grow up in this house where everybody is hypersexual. Because we don't talk about hypersexual in our communities. We don't. So let's say you grow up in a household where everybody has been touched on. So let's say if everybody been touched on, let's just say hypothetically, you grew up in a house and everybody been touched on, right? Inappropriately touched. Okay? So, first of all, when people are inappropriately touched at a young age, do you realize they hormones kick in? So this is how you get the little girls that are very curvaceous before they time. This is how you get those little girls that you say are fast. hmm Even some little boys. So, okay, so now this is happening. The body is changing, right? So this is how you get a lot of the girls that discover their body before they discover their man. They discover their body before they discover their spirit. They discover their body before they discover their creativity. They discover their body before they discover it's more to life than just living from the flesh. So this is how you get people that are promiscuous, people that learn how to um, charm with their flesh. This is how you get people that learn how to seduce people with their flesh. This is how you get people to learn how to attract things with their flesh, right? So a lot of people start using their flesh to to for wicked things, right? Because they don't realize that it's wicked because it was so much essaying going on during this rack epidemic, I'm telling you. So you have women at a young age who was young girls who was giving hush money. So that's where sugar daddies come from, right? So you have women that actually have these men where they use their body to get this money. And they do these things in the dark thinking nobody will see. And these are the things. I ain't saying that this necessarily come from the crack epidemic because prostitution been around. It was in the Bible. It's been around for a long time. But I'm saying this essaying that was going on during the rap epidemic had such an effect on people that people was actually growing up in households that was over sexualized, where you have the, if you a little boy and you grow up and every woman in the house is cleavage sitting out. You a little boy, you at eye level. You walking around, that's all you see is cleavage. That's all you see is butts. That's all you see. He's either gonna be a man whore or he's not even gonna even be attracted to that. because that's pretty much what we working with here, right? Because we not teaching him about the mind. We not teaching him about the heart. We not teaching him about the soul. We not teaching him about something real. So all he see is flesh. Because we put we worship our flesh. But we worship our flesh, right? And I say we worship the flesh because when we operate out of the flesh, we become over sexualized. And that's a side effect of being essay. It's like you learned how to use your body first. That is a sign of being essay. When you think you are your body. So that becomes something that a lot of people need to work on because a lot of people disassociated, like separated from the body, and lost themselves and stopped valuing who they were because they just reduced down to the body. So that becomes the root chakra. That becomes the lower self. So a lot of people are living from their lower self. Why? Because they don't know they living from their lower self because they trapped down in their lower self because of what happened. Okay? So the essaying is something that we need to actually look up, learn what the signs are. Um, if you gotta go get yourself some help, go get yourself some help. But read up on it. Learn about what the emotional triggers are. Learn about what the predator energy is. Because something I found out too, if you was SA, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna attract somebody that was SA. So that's gonna become a trauma bond that y'all share. Now whether y'all had that conversation or not, that's different. But you can actually think you in love with somebody and it's a trauma bond because y'all been essayed, but you don't know it because it might be a man that's not gonna tell you that, and you just be like, I just love him. I don't know what it is. I just love him. These bonds are real, and these become soul ties, and these become how our souls be tied to people and we be bound to people and bound to people. And this is what it say in the Bible that it's a curse, right? Say you're gonna be up under this curse. So you gotta get yourself from up under this curse, right? How do you do that? You break the curse with love, right? But you gotta get this knowledge. That's loving yourself enough to get this knowledge to break the curse, right? Okay. So essaying is definitely an issue, right? Okay. So verbal abuse. A lot of people went through verbal abuse during the 80s. There's a lot of verbal abuse going on. So what is what is verbal abuse? Calling people out their names, belittling people, bullying on people, calling people hurtful things, saying things to people to hurt their feelings. Not being aware that you hurting people's feelings, not being compassionate, not taking time to think about what you saying to people. So we went through a lot of this during these days because a lot of us the parents was on drugs, so you probably didn't have the cutest clothes. So you might have got capped on. Your parents probably was on drugs. So you probably became somebody else's responsibility who was frustrated with your parent who probably was talking to you crazy. It's so many different scenarios that we could come up with people was verbally abused during these 80s. And some of this verbal abuse became a comfort zone. So some people got comfortable being called out their name. Some people got comfortable being belittled. Some people got comfortable being talked to crazy. So some people are comfortable with that toxic energy. Some people are comfortable living in that toxic situation because that's the environment that they grew up in. So that's the environment that they are used to. So some people don't even realize that how they talk to people is inappropriate. Some people do not know how to communicate. Why? Because communication was nothing that was taught in the 80s. Why? Because we came from it was broken times, right? So people was not working on communication. People was not working on affirmations and uplifting people and speaking life over people. People was the addictions was high. The addiction was ruling over people. The addiction was strong. It was a lot of things that people were suppressing. It was a lot of emotions that people wasn't dealing with. It was a lot of trauma that people was suppressing and hiding because they came from an era where go on in this house, stay in this house, right? So that toxic energy started bubbling over into verbal abuse, right? Even back in the day, they was having the whole light versus dark situation. So a lot of the words became verbal abuse. A lot of people got verbally abused by grandparents, where the grandparents would talk about you if you was dark, or if you was light, or if your hair wasn't this texture, or if your teeth wasn't straight, or whatever have you. They would have you, but it came from how they talked to them because they went through their whole what is it? The Jim Crow, the Willie Lynch letter. They went through the whole um, where they took them through some transformations, right? So that's why we study these different transformations that we went through as a culture, so we know what we need to heal from, right? Okay, so we have the abandonment issues, the neglect issues, essay issues, the verbal abuse. Um, we got the alcoholism. Um, a lot of people use alcohol to cope with their childhood trauma. Yes, when they emotionally triggered, alcohol becomes their choice. Now, what the problem with that is, that's just treating the symptoms. That's not dealing with the problem. So the problem gonna stay there. The problem not going nowhere until you truly face the problem. And the problem is a lot of us that it was a war on drugs, so it was a war. We have to deal with excessive damages from the war, you know. So this is what we doing right now. We just accessing some of the damages. Today we raising awareness that we went through something as a people in the 80s. You know, um, we gonna really get into what all we went through, but we just bringing this up today that we got a lot of healing to do. We got a lot of work to do, right? We do. Y'all concur? We got a lot of work to do. Yep, working on these abandonment issues because we passing this stuff on to the next generation, right? And we passing a lot of this stuff on to the next generation unaware, right? So a lot of the fathers that abandon their children is because they fathers abandon them. A lot of the women that are verbally abusive to their children is because their mothers and fathers was verbally abusive to them. You know, a lot of people that suffer from the neglect issues is because they were neglected by somebody. A lot of people that have abandonment issues is because they were abandoned. So it's not to say that people are like, it happened to me, so I'm going to do it to someone else. Some of these things, people are unconscious that they are even hurting from this stuff. So these people are just hurting from it because they suppressing their emotions, so they don't really know what they hurting from. So this is one of the reasons I'm bringing it up with examples and scenarios to make it realistic for a lot of people, so a lot of people can resonate with it, right? So what we gonna do is start our healing journey with these eight. So the first thing we gonna do is create some journal prompts about your abandonment issues. You can look on Google, ask AI. A lot of people ask Google, but you can ask Google about journaling prompts that help with abandonment issues, and they will give you some ideas to think outside the box, to where you can create a journal for your neglect issues. And you can start the process of healing yourself from these neglect issues. And you can start healing yourself from these abandonment issues. You can like really start learning what they is. Don't worry, we will be talking about them. We will be bringing them up. But this is why we doing this, because we got to help people heal. You know what I'm saying? A lot of us walking around and don't even know that some of these things are problems, right? Because if we knew, we would do something about it, right? But a lot of us don't know, okay? Um, so we're talking about from the 80s, we healing confidence. A lot of confidence was broken. Family was broken. Um, a lot of poverty. Um, not being financial literate, not learning um, the bare necessities. Um, and I say that because my community was affected by the crack epidemic. So a lot of us got left behind on simple shit. So we gon' work on this simple shit. Now this, it might not be for everybody because everybody didn't have to survive this. Everybody didn't have to go through this. Everybody didn't have to experience this. But for those that are survivors of the 80s, I'm creating this content for us so we can start healing ourselves, okay? So, like I said, the first homework you got is to go look up what abandonment issues are, neglect issues. If you experience SA, go look it up. Go look up verbal abuse. You know, whatever you could think of, go and start looking it up. Start learning, you know, more about what it is you went through. The more you learn, the more you gonna grow. Okay? So go ahead and get you started. learning about your issues because your issues and your tissues. We'll learn about that next. But I give gratitude for coming, showing up to my first 80s, surviving the 80s series. I definitely give gratitude to all of y'all that came, that hit that tapped the like up there and all that good stuff. So I will talk to y'all beautiful souls real soon. And I will definitely be here in the Grand Rising to do those readings at 8 a.m. I did start doing the readings at 8 a.m. Monday through Friday, Grand Rising readings. So I will be on YouTube 8 a.m. Monday through Friday and every Tuesday at 8 p.m. So I give gratitude and I'll talk to you beautiful souls real soon.